Well, this episode is way overdue, actually quite a bit. If you guys have been watching The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I already did my first review, so you can go ahead and check out the episode 1 review later on after this. And before I get into my review of the second episode, which is titled The Star-Spangled Man, I want you guys to go ahead and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, of course. Join my Discord. The invitation link to that is down in the description box below. And with all that being said, let's go ahead and get to the review of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier episode 2. So The Falcon and the Winter Soldier episode 2 starts off with the introduction of the brand new Captain America, is what everybody's calling him. But really, we all know him to be the U.S. agent from the comics, if you read the comics. And his name is John Walker, played by Wyatt Russell, who is actually the son of Kurt Russell, which is also another actor that was in the MCU in the second Guardians of the Galaxy movie, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And he wasn't the only addition to this week's Disney Plus episode. We get to see other additional characters, which I'll get into in a second. So in the opening minutes, John revisits his old high school. He's televised. It opens up with him opening this jacket revealing his uniform as the new Captain America. Obviously, it's not an exact copy of it. Neither is an exact copy of the comic book version where he wears like the red, white, and black, where he has like mostly black on the top. And in the opening minutes, he's introduced in Good Morning America to the world as the new Captain America. Sans the super soldier serum, he doesn't really have it, not yet, which is why we haven't seen him go crazy. And neither Sam Wilson or Bucky Barnes is accepting the fact that we got a new Captain America when John claims to be feeling some sort of like connection with the predecessor, which is that of Steve Rogers' Captain America. So shortly thereafter, Bucky tracks down Sam Wilson, all upset, just wondering why Bucky never took up the mantle of Captain America in the first place and why he was so hesitant to do so. So he's just about to go on a mission, and Sam isn't really in the mood to debate anything with Bucky Barnes. He doesn't want to give a reason as to why he gave up the shield, when we all know back in the very end of Endgame, Old Man Cap was passing on the mantle to Sam Wilson because he felt like he was the right choice. That may also be the reason as to why Bucky invited himself along the mission, just to antagonize a little bit, like patronize a little bit of Sam Wilson, and just bothering him until he actually gives in and actually takes up the mantle. So he just invites himself over. This begins like the adventure of this this weird dynamic duo where they're not exactly buddies or friends, but like they're in the same line of work. So it's kind of interesting to see this dynamic. They have a very interesting dynamic. They start off rough, of course. It never ends up it never starts off well and easy because, like real life, sometimes people have, friction between one another. So after they land in Europe, Sam and Bucky, they discovered these group of people called the Flag Smashers, and their leader by the name of Carly, and all of their super soldiers. So Bucky is not the only super soldier there. And the new Captain America and Battlestar, his companion, who's played by an actor, I can't remember his name. He shows up, and Sam and Bucky are just completely overwhelmed at the fact that they're right there, and Bucky's just in disgust, especially when Battlestar introduces himself as Battlestar, who's also a character in the comics. And regardless, the Flag Smashers easily just overcome, and they just overcome these people. They basically kick their asses. They wipe the floor. Captain America shows up with Battlestar to assist Bucky and Sam, who were fighting the Flag Smashers on top of the truck. And they made it seem like they were getting ready to kick some ass and save the day. It all starts off pretty well, but then it quickly takes a turn when they get their asses handed to them, and they just simply get defeated. And they just pull up in his car, pick up Bucky and Sam, and John Walker, who's the new Captain America, is trying to play it cool, trying to be very nice. He's trying really, really hard. He's not trying to taint this potential relationship that he thinks he's gonna have with these individuals Sam and Bucky, but he's trying really hard to be the good guy. But Bucky, and especially Bucky, is not having it. And once they get back to the U.S., so Bucky brings Sam along to meet a guy that he knew that not even Steve Rogers knew about. And this guy, that's right, the first African-American Captain America is Isaiah Bradley. I didn't think they would actually do this, but it caught me a little bit by surprise, especially how early he was introduced in this series. Isaiah Bradley, if you don't know, he is the first prototype Captain America, African-American prototype Captain America, who was actually introduced back in the original comics that debuted back in 2003. It's called Truth, Red, White, and Black. And it's actually based off real life experimentations that occurred back in the day that was kept into secrecy, where they experimented over like hundreds of African American individuals, but it wasn't for super soldiers back in the day. It was actually more for like, I guess, some sort of gas that they were testing on them. A lot of fatalities occurred, of course, most of these individuals died. Whereas in this case, in this story, they tested the super soldier serum on all these individuals, but all of them died with the exception of Isaiah Bradley, who was actually a prototype Captain America, and he was around in the 50s in the MCU timeline, whereas in the comics, he was actually around in the 40s while Captain America was still alive. And the differences between the MCU version, in the MCU version, Isaiah Bradley claims to be kept in prison for like about 30 years, whereas in the comics, he was actually kept in prison for about 17 years. He was let out in the 60s in the comics. And in the MCU, he was actually experimented for 3 whole decades, and he was just tortured. He still very much has his strength, as was demonstrated with Isaiah Bradley's anger, where he tossed like a toolbox and he just threw it against the wall and it just penetrated the wall with ease. He's still very much strong, but obviously old because he's been around since that time. So they did change a little bit of his character, but very minor details. That was like kind of like a one-off story that occurred like back in the day, almost 20 years ago. It never like altered like the timeline or the chronological order, timeline of the Marvel Comics universe. Obviously, it was just added in there, something that was kept in secrecy. So I mean, that was a brief history of Isaiah Bradley. Just letting you know, not the full history. If you want to get the full history, do some research. In the MCU, Isaiah was a super soldier in the 50s. Who again, like he went up against the Winter Soldier back in the day. He literally ripped his arm off. That's why he was asking like, "How's your arm?" in that scene. And once Isaiah came home, he was in prison and experimented on for 3 decades, like I mentioned. And after Isaiah throws him out, the argument between Sam and Bucky draws the unwelcome attention of like the police. Now this is the part where like it really caught my attention, and I'm like, it made me go like, wow, they're actually addressing this, especially in a Marvel film, because this is something that's never been addressed. These idiot dick-headed cops are clearly racist and actually confront Sam and going like, what's going on here? And then they ask Bucky, who's white, it's like, is this guy bothering you? And I'm like, oh my God, they're really doing this. They touched upon a little bit of racism in the first episode, which I forgot to bring up, but they touched upon it again in the second episode. And there was a lot of like, bits and pieces of like racism references here and there in the second episode. Like where Sam Wilson and Bucky are walking along in this neighborhood where Isaiah Bradley lives. There's this little kid, he's like, hey, you're the Black Falcon. And the Falcon's like, no, it's not Black Falcon, it's just Falcon. And he's like, what do I call you, Black Kid? And the kid's like, whatever, like it was a little silly, but it was like funny because like racism, obviously, this takes place in the real world. Racism is a thing and it occurs. And I'm like, wow, they actually are going to touch upon this. And I'm like, this is really cool, man. Like I can't believe they're doing it. But it really, like, it got me upset to the core a little bit when those freaking idiot cops, like, thought that Sam was, like, trying to, I guess, hurt Bucky or something, all because of a heated argument they were having in the middle of the street. So John arranges for Bucky's release because, Bucky actually got arrested right then and there on the street because he did not attend his mandated court, therapy session. And because he thinks that Bucky and Sam will work with him if he releases them. It turns out that like Bucky is not actually going to work with him, neither is Sam. And I guess that's where like John Walker just goes like, okay, I'm done with this nice guy stuff. And he just basically tells Bucky and Sam, hey, just stay out of my way. So that's where we see like the dark side of John Walker, Captain America. He's a guy that cannot keep his composure. He's obviously a guy that can get easily upset. I mean, I'll give him credit where credit is due. He actually tried to work with them, but Bucky and Sam were just not having it. So outside of jail, Bucky and Sam once again they reject John's invitation to have them join John. John wants him to stay out of his way, obviously, and then the Winter Soldier decides that one man may have the answers to what they need to know about all these super soldiers just appearing, and that is Helmut Zemo. And another thing I wanted to address, there was like this funny moment where like they were having a therapy session, Sam and Bucky, and they were talking to the therapist, and they really let out a lot of the things that was lingering within them, just the problems that they wanted to address to each other. And I thought that was pretty cool. It was also pretty funny because they actually had a staring contest where they actually did that a little earlier in like the cargo plane where like they're heading to their mission. So I thought that was pretty funny. But overall, I had a great time with this episode. It addressed a few things that I had never thought that they would address, like, you know, a little bit of like of racism, which was in this episode. And Isaiah Bradley, and of course his grandson, who's actually going to become, I believe, Patriot, if I'm not mistaken, who's actually, you know, which is pretty much an Easter egg or a reference to the Young Avengers, which is a movie that we probably are going to expect to see probably within the next 6 or 5 years or something like that. So they're really laying out like the breadcrumbs of the Young Avengers. You know, we got a few Young Avengers already, and we got Ms. Marvel coming up. We have Stature from the Ant-Man and the Wasp movie. We have the twins from WandaVision, and then now we got Patriot, I believe. And that's going to be really cool to see. I can't wait. I'm excited. Supposedly, his son Elijah Bradley is supposed to be debuting as, you know, his comic book counterpart, but so far we only see Elijah Bradley, and it's kind of cool once again to see Isaiah Bradley, the original, the OG African American Captain America, which was really awesome. I never thought they would do that, but they did, and I was like, oh shit. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. That's my review. Sorry it was a bit overdue. I wish I had gotten it over with, but I had other videos to do that I thought would take more like precedence than this one. So anyways, I wanted to get it over with and just cover it, and I'll promise to do the episode 3 review on time, which will be this Friday that's coming up. All right, so what did you think of it? Have you seen the Falcon and Winter Soldier episode 2? You comment down below, let me know your thoughts, and as always, I will see you all in the next comic panel.